You have a lot of pictures of killing women, don't you? Pictures you've drawn?
I do. Not
you?
just women.
Huh?
Not just women.
Peggy Hettrick is murdered. She had genital mutilation, and one of her nipples has been removed.
How could this happen to us?
A stab wound done with surgical precision. And the people who are in charge aren't doing what needs to be done. This is the story of Peggy Hettrick. Hi, Crime Junkies. I'm your host, Ashley Flowers.
And I'm Britt.
And we are officially back from tour. It's been a long couple of months.
But so much fun.
We got to see 75,000 of our closest friends, thanks to State Farm and Pluto TV, who were the sponsors for the tour. Let us get on the road, get to meet the fans.
Mm-hmm.
But this was such an incredible story. I mean, collective gas. And it's one that has a very strong call to action that we need your help with. So for those of you who couldn't make it on the road, we wanted to bring this story to you as well.
How could this have happened to us? But, you know, over the years, I see so many people losing loved ones. But the one question that keeps coming back to me is, if we had done something different, if we'd stayed in Hawaii, if we'd stayed in Spain, this would have never happened, you know? Why did this happen? What brought us here to this place, you know, for this to happen? There's so many multiple universes, you know. We could have stayed here, stayed there, moved to Florida earlier, and she would have been alive today. But it didn't happen that way. Why? I don't know. But I wish we would have done some things differently. Yeah. In my lifetime now, it's been 30 some years since Peggy's gone, and still nothing has been done about it. And it's like everybody just wants to turn a blind eye to it and move on. What? Move on? I've got stage 4 colon cancer. I'm doing all right now, but my doctor has told me, and she was very blunt about it. She said, you know that this is going to kill you. And I said, yeah, I know that. I understand that. So that's why I agreed to do this interview, because I may not be around before this comes to a conclusion, you know, but I'd like to see it start. I'd like to see them get busy and do their job and give Peggy a resolution. You know, maybe I'll still be around. I don't know, but I'll try to be around. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I can't be. I have to be strong, and if we can do something for Peg and her memory, then let's get it done now.
All right, the man you just heard speaking was Tom Hettrick. And his sister Peggy Hettrick was murdered in Fort Collins, Colorado back in 1987. And the thing is, there is still plenty that can be done to solve this case. The problem is the people who are in charge right now, who have the case, aren't doing what needs to be done to solve it. But our crime junkies know what helps with that, right?
Mm-hmm. A little bit of pressure.
And a lot of noise. And so the reason we went on tour, the reason we're bringing this story again, is we want to tell people why they should be making noise, why they should be straight up mad, not just on behalf of Tom and Peggy, but so many people in our story. And it's a story that starts on February 11th, 1987. That's when a guy named Woody is bicycling to work. It's like 7 a.m. And even though it's February in Fort Collins, Colorado, like there's no snow on the ground, but it's cold. So I imagine he's just like head down, like pedaling, kind of in the zone where you like, you know, zone out a little bit.
Yeah.
But then something catches his attention, like in this field. And when he looks down, he sees this splash of red. But he realizes it's not just red, this is blood. And so forget work, like he has to call police. And when they show up, there is this 100-foot-long trail of blood from that splash of blood by the curb all the way to the middle of the field. And that's where they find the body of a woman. Now, she's laying face up. Her arms are over her head. Her bra and her shirt have been pulled up. Her pants and her underwear have been pulled down. And they can't see what's causing the blood. They suspect that she has some kind of wound to her back, but they won't know at the moment. But what they can see is that one of her nipples has been removed. But everything else is still on her. I mean, her clothes, she's still got her purse slung over her shoulder, and everything is inside it, including her checkbook, which is how they realize she's 37-year-old Peggy Hettrick. Now, by 9 a.m., this field is a frenzy with officers. One of the people on the scene that day, Sergeant Reid Martinez, he said when he showed up, he was surprised to see basically all of Fort Collins Police Department there on the scene. He's like, this was an all-hands-on-deck situation. The problem is, in 1987, not all of those hands were gloved. But when they actually touch her and turn her over, they see that they were correct. There's a wound to her back, a stab wound on her upper back that was causing the bleeding. And they also see that she has grass and debris on her butt, which they start forming this kind of theory based around what they're seeing. Because if you follow that blood trail all the way back to the curb, what they see are some critical things. So they see a set of footprints, not Peggy's footprints, by this pool. And then they also see a cigarette butt in the pool of blood. And Peggy was a known smoker. So they start to wonder, maybe she was walking, got surprise attacked from behind. She's walking and smoking. She drops the cigarette and her attacker pulled down her pants and then drug her. And they're thinking that because of the grass and stuff found on her butt. Mm-hmm. They're also thinking that because there was not just the bloody drag mark, but there was also this trail where you could tell that something was drug in the dirt, and they suspected that it was her shoes. Mm-hmm. And I was literally at one point, you saw me dragging people across the audio check office. Yes. And the only way that makes sense is because normally if you drag someone,
your feet kind of splay out into a V.
Exactly. So I think the reason they're thinking this is she had to have had her pants down first, not because of the grass, but also because to make these marks.
The shoes were together.
Right. The problem I have with this is there's something that doesn't make sense to me. If they're dragging her and she's bleeding and her shoes are making this trail, those should line up. But the drag marks and the blood trail are actually very different. And at one point, they even cross each other, which nobody can seem to really make sense of. I mean, I've heard some people theorize, well, maybe there's two people. And what if one of them had her coat and the coat was bloody?
But my problem with that is her coat isn't just on her. It's on her with her purse still over her shoulder. No one undressed her and then redressed her that much.
And it's also not the coat that's actively bleeding. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? The blood is coming from her, and for it to make a 100-foot-long trail, it just doesn't add up. And maybe it's a red herring, or we're not understanding what those are, because the other thing I noticed is that Peggy's shoes don't seem really dirty in the photos that I have. And not that it was muddy or anything like that.
But there should still be dust and pieces of grass. I mean, there's debris on her body, on her butt.
Right. So the question is, how did she get out there in the middle of that field? And the other critical question is, who wore men's Tom McCann dress shoes size 8.5 or 9? Because that's what they determined those critical footprints by the blood pool were.
And the blood there by the curb and the trail, that's from the stab wound, not the mutilation, right? Active bleeding.
Yes. So when they do an autopsy, they realize that her nipple being removed, that was done post-mortem. So after she was already deceased, that wouldn't have been bleeding. The other thing they determine at the autopsy is she was also mutilated elsewhere. So she had genital mutilation as well. And her nipple being removed, the ME notes that was done with surgical precision. And they said it was done with a small, sharp instrument, something like a scalpel almost, which was different than what was used to stab her, because they determined that was a knife that had a 5-inch serrated blade. But they don't find either of those weapons in the field. And you know what else they don't find? Her nipple. But they're like, don't worry, we know exactly who to call to find it. The Scouts.
So kids.
Like fully children. And Britt, when I first heard this, my initial reaction when I read this was like, you mean to tell me that in my childhood, they had me out there selling freaking Thin Mints when I could have been like looking for evidence. Like I would have been an Eagle Scout.
100%.
Yeah, that was not a badge I could have. But this is where I'm introducing a new Crime Junkie life rule. Always go a layer deeper. Because once I dug, it wasn't the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts that were out there looking for body parts. It was actually something called the Explorer Scouts.
But still kids.
Oh, that's still fully like high school kids. And if you don't know, this is also like a quick PSA to my crime junkies. I am trying to put together an episode for the near future about the Explorer program. I'm not saying like pull your kids out if you have kids in it. I'm just saying pay attention. Get involved.
Ask some questions.
I have found there is a lot of abuse that happens in that program. So quick PSA, future episode to come. Hit me up if you have a story. But anyways, kids are out there looking for nipples, which they don't find. And the police are looking for a perp. And they decide that to find this person, the first thing they need to do is they need to get to know Peggy. They need to understand her last movements. So they start by going to her apartment. And they learn that she had a temporary roommate at the time named Sharon. And temporary is important because that night when Peggy got off work at around 9 p.m. from the fashion bar and she walked home, it wasn't far away, she found herself locked out of the apartment because they were sharing keys. And she's like banging on the door. And Sharon is either out drinking and forgot to get home in time to let her in, or she got home, but because she'd been out drinking, she was like home passed out. Either way, Peggy's banging, can't get inside. So making the best of like a mess situation, she decides to go kind of bop around to a couple local bars. She has a drink. She's using the payphone, trying to like call home and wake Sharon up. By around midnight, she decides to head back, again, banging on the door. And this time, Sharon is there. She lets her in. But Peggy is not staying in for the night. She's there to do a little change of clothes, get out of her work clothes, change into jeans and a blouse, or like jeans and a going out top for my millennials. And she goes back out. She goes to this place called the Prime Minister, also within walking distance. And this was a regular haunt for Peggy. So it's not surprising that she runs into somebody she knows, her on again, off again, currently off boyfriend, Matt Zoellner. Now, Matt was actually there at the bar that night with another woman, someone he had just met that evening, like didn't even remember her name. It was like maybe Sean. He said, though, he saw Peggy and they chatted for a little bit. He even offered her a ride when he realized that she'd walked, and she originally accepted, but he like went to the bathroom, and when he came out, she was leaving alone. And so he figured maybe she just changed her mind or whatever. And so he said him and maybe Sean, they stayed till last call. Then maybe Sean went home with him. She stayed with him till like 3 or 3:30. And other people back this up. So the bartender at Prime Minister saw Peggy leaving alone at 1:15 in the morning. And maybe Sean backs up that she was with Matt till last call, then back at his place till 3:30. So this is the last time Peggy is seen. 1:15 in the morning, leaving the Prime Minister alone. And this does kind of work with their theory, because if you were to look at a map, the field where Peggy's body was found is kind of in between the Prime Minister and her apartment. So
she was walking home.
Yeah, smoking a cigarette, surprised, like everything's still kind of fitting. So the question is, who would be in this field, this like empty field in the early morning hours? Now, they had done an initial canvass and nobody in the area had seen or heard anything. But one detective, Linda Wheeler, she decides she wants to just go knocking on doors again, starting with the people like absolutely closest to the crime scene. And the closest trailer is like 200 yards away, and it belongs to a guy named Clyde Masters. So they go knocking on his door, and Clyde says the same thing, didn't see or hear anything. But he says, come to think of it, my son, 15-year-old Tim, he lives with him in the trailer, and he cuts through that field every morning to get to the school bus. And he says, on that morning that you found that woman, he hesitated in the field a little bit. Like, didn't do anything, wasn't there long. I mean, he still made it to the school bus on time. But he says, knowing what you found, maybe it's just kind of weird. And police think it's weird too, because they find out that Tim would have been going through that field at about 7 a.m., which is almost the same time that Woody ends up finding Peggy. Woody's the guy on the bicycle. So they're like, we know Peggy's there. If you saw her there, why wouldn't you say something? Why would you go into school like nothing happened unless you were involved? So they go right to the school. They pull Tim out of class. And right away, before they say a word, he knows exactly why they're there. But he told investigators then the same thing that he told us when we interviewed him so many years later.
So February 11th, 1987, I woke up at a normal time. I think it was somewhere around 6 o'clock. I still remember my father had fixed sausage and eggs for breakfast that day. So I had sausage and eggs for breakfast, took a shower, got dressed. I typically wore a t-shirt, jeans, and a jean jacket. And about 6:55, I walked out the back door to head through the field to go catch my bus. And I still remember to this day, when I was getting close, we had a little fence halfway across the property line, like not at the edge of my property, but about halfway between the trailer and the edge of the property. And I remember seeing, at that time of day, it looked like there was trash out in the field. I thought somebody had dumped some trash out in the field. That's what it looked like. And I remember thinking, man, this kind of crap never used to happen before these roads went in. Now people are dumping trash in the fields. And I walked on and went through the fence onto the field north of my house. And I remember seeing it started to look more like a body out there. And I remember seeing, it looked like someone had spray painted brown paint on the ground, reddish brown paint, like a rust color, along the field going out to it. And I remember walking my normal path, and then I veered over to go look and see what the hell was in the field. And I walked over towards it, stood there and looked at it, and to 15-year-old me, I think I was in such a state of shock that I couldn't believe that was a body. I thought it was a mannequin, specifically a Recessa Annie doll, that someone had stolen from the school and dropped out in the field as a prank. And I remember walking away, kind of confused about it, thinking, no, there's no way it's a body. It's somebody dropped a mannequin out there. And I walked on, caught my school bus, and I didn't say anything to anybody about it.
All right. First of all, we called it the Life Rule number 10 tour for a reason. Everyone knows it.
It's never a mannequin.
It's never a mannequin. But there are a couple of things to keep in mind. So, number one, this is 1987, right? This is the year before you and I were even born.
No crime junkie life rules.
Exactly. And he didn't just say it was a mannequin. He specifically said he thought it was a Recessa Annie doll, like he has in his school. Now, I don't know if anyone listening knows what a Recessa Annie doll is. They probably know. They definitely know if they came to tour. You probably know if you follow me on Instagram. I didn't know when this whole thing started, so I ordered one on eBay.
Yes, you did.
She has been living in the office. She's like become my friend.
And she's been on the road with us.
She has. She's been everywhere. Annie's like my emotional support, like through tour. They're basically like these, like the body blows up, but like the head, the feet, and the arms are like solid. It's very strange, very lifelike. And not just lifelike, but like deceased-like.
Well, it's a CPR doll.
Yeah. And what's so wild is I have this picture that I'm not going to share of Peggy's face as she's lying in the field and this Recessa Annie doll side by side. The way Peggy is pale, the way that her mouth is a gap, her haircut, color, style, everything is identical. And I've showed a couple of people on the production team, and I explain it the same way I'm explaining it now, and people are like, okay, yeah, sure, I maybe understand it. And if I show people the picture, it's always just, I showed you, it's just a gasp.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's uncanny.
It is. So if you're 15 and you're used to seeing that at your school all the time, you don't believe that you're walking to school and going to find a dead body. Like, that's just not your reality.
Your mind just like fills in the blanks.
Exactly. So you have that. And then the other thing is, again, a grown man told us the story when we went to go speak with him. But like I said, he was a 15-year-old kid when this happened. But it doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters. Police do not believe that he could have seen Peggy and thought she was a Recessa Annie doll, a mannequin, whatever. So they bring him in for questioning, which his dad okays. Tim's by himself during this. And the whole time he is insistent he had nothing to do with this. But when they give him a polygraph, that says otherwise.
Which that's another life rule, never take a polygraph.
And we have another one, always get a lawyer. But Tim said that he and his dad didn't know that they could get a lawyer or should get a lawyer at the time. And Tim also didn't realize that they were searching his trailer, paying specific attention to his room, where they were finding things like toy guns, a knife collection, and they're still looking for a murder weapon at this time. They also found a pair of pants with a spot of blood on them. And they found this next thing that they think is the clincher, like their proof that they're on to a dangerous individual. They find a bunch of Tim's drawings. Two branches of the same tree. Two pieces of a soul. Where one sister goes, the other will be. For she is but half of the whole. The drawings become central to this case.
And I've seen these drawings so many times, Ashley.
They're violent. There's one with it looks like they're all hand drawn. One's holding a head with a gun behind it.
Some of them have machete knives
yes.
and stabs. There's also things that are military patches,
yeah.
and there's homework in the middle of one of the drawings.
Yes. When we went on tour, we would show the drawings, and I don't want to downplay it. People would do this collective gasp where they were
more than we even thought they would.
Yeah, they were shocked by them. But what I kept saying on tour is I remember middle school does not feel that far away. I don't want to do the math because it is that far away, but I remember the boys in my class doing these weird drawings.
Well, and I told you my son's in high school now. He was in middle school, and he also drew weird things. I showed you some of his drawings.
Yeah.
There's a cat god and a scepter, but it's also on algebra homework.
Right.
It all felt very benign to me.
Right. But it did not feel benign to these investigators. So as they're finding this stuff, they're sharing it with the cops interrogating Tim. And they take turns interrogating him alone over the course of 9 hours.
What you think about all this? What you think about the people that... Tell me what's going on in here all day since I haven't been here.
Well, they're pretty much sure that I did it.
Why are they sure you did it?
Because all the evidence points towards me, I guess.
You have a lot of pictures of killing women, don't you? Pictures you've drawn?
I do.
Don't
Not
you?
just women.
Huh?
Not just women.
Not just women, but you do have pictures of women being killed, don't you?
Yeah, I guess I do so.
But you have all those knives and stuff. Don't you do anything with your knives anymore?
I like to collect knives.
And what else do you do with them?
I don't do much of anything.
You just collect them?
I use them when I go hiking for stuff.
What do you use them for?
Cutting wood and stuff.
I want to clear this up. In your mind, it's important you tell the truth.
I have told the truth.
Can you dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She has lost her life. She has no more freedom. She can't do a thing. Her life is ended. You scared a lot of people. You scared me. I didn't sleep last night. I slept about 2 hours. You scared the hell out of me. Thank God we found you. Half the detective bureau, half my people lost all their sleep last night. We're trying to find you.
Now, in all that time, Tim never confessed, never admitted anything, which in and of itself, I think is kind of a miracle. We've seen people crumble under less pressure.
Who are grown adults.
Right. But Tim never caves. He swears he had nothing to do with this. And all they have are these drawings, which make them like sure that something is up, but they can't arrest him for drawing. So they have to release him, but they are convinced that he is still their guy. None more than a man named Detective Jim Broderick. And really, he's looking at a couple of things when he is thinking that Tim is guilty. I mean, first and foremost, the drawings. At some point when Tim had been interviewed, it comes out that he knew that Peggy's nipple had been removed, which to Jim, it's like if you stayed far away, which was always his story.
And thought it was a mannequin.
Yeah, how would you know that? The other thing he points to is that Tim's shoe prints were found in the field near Peggy's body. So he knows if he's going to build a case against him, he has to get more. And so what he does is he has the FBI do a profile, sends them everything about their case, all the stuff they have on Tim, drawings, all of it. Please do a profile. So they send back their official profile and they're like, no, like this kid is not your guy. And you can't say that this kid killed this woman based on some drawings. Mm-hmm. Now, instead of hearing that and then casting a wider net or thinking like, who should we be looking at? Right. It's kind of like they go profiler shopping. And they don't do another official profile. I don't know if the FBI probably just is like a one and done kind of thing.
Feels like it.
I'm sure they're not like, yeah, we'll just redo that for you. The police basically do a phone a friend and call up this guy in Washington to do an unofficial thing. And they get this memo back and the guy's like, listen, I don't know about all the drawings and stuff, whatever. Maybe a lot of if, ands, buts, maybes, whatever. But he's like, listen, what I have seen before are cases where a suspect will position their victim in a way so that they can see them after the crime or maybe even see the crime scene unfold, whatever. And where the master's trailer did have a direct line of sight to where Peggy was found. So that's enough for Jim Broderick. The takeaway is clear that this kid is dangerous and it is his job, nay his duty, to get him off the streets of Fort Collins. So the police don't let up. They are pulling him out of class. They're telling his teachers that he is a dangerous individual suspected of murder, which obviously doesn't stay with just the teachers. Tim said that at one point, he would be walking down the hall and kids would go to the other side because they didn't want to walk next to the kids suspected of murder. And he wasn't just getting it at school. It was coming at him from all angles. Every day for the first month of the investigation, the newspaper would show up at their house and the front page was about Peggy's case, how they had one singular suspect that they were honing in on. But Tim wouldn't break in all that time. And he had answers for a lot of things. So yes, his shoe prints were in the field, but he walks through that field. And his prints were not the critical ones, those Tom McCann dress shoes. The closest it came was 5 to 7 feet away from Peggy, which is where he said he was walking and saw her. And he said, I knew her nipple had been removed, but not because I saw it or did it. A girl in my art class told me about it.
Well, and the police had kids out looking for the nipple. Kids talk.
Yes. The blood that they found on his pants turned out to be his own blood. The knives that they collected from his room, his whole knife collection, none of them could be connected to be the murder weapon. And there were unidentified prints found on Peggy's purse and unidentified hairs found on her, none of which belonged to Tim. So they had no choice but at some point to cast a wider net. And they would look at some other people, but quickly rule them out. And so it's not surprising that this case cooled off pretty quickly, which was so frustrating for Peggy's family. And, it's so, what I found so, revealing, and I see this in a lot of cases, but it was just so clear in this one to me. When someone dies, there's this 2D version of them that gets left behind, especially when it's back in the 80s or whatever. It's you get a couple of lines in a newspaper about who Peggy was. And that's all I had to go off of when I first started looking into this case. And I want to give our listeners a sense of it. So if you would read what was published about her.
Mm-hmm. Police identified her as Peggy Hettrick, 37, college dropout, bar hopper, and aspiring writer who worked at the Fashion Bar, a nearby clothing store. Her friends privately worried something horrible would happen to her, given her late-night impulses, her jealousies, her appetite for adventure. Sometimes she would head out into the night just to collect details for the book she was writing or to spy on her boyfriend.
And that is so far from the Peggy that I've come to know through her brother Tom over the last year and a half. Because that college dropout who worked at a clothing store, she was brilliant. She had this college sweetheart named Frank who she was madly in love with. They were planning a future. They were going to get married and have kids. It was going to be a bright future. When I say she's brilliant, I mean this woman spoke 4 different languages. She traveled all over the world. Her family and her lived in other countries. She was writing this novel. But then her life took this hard left turn when Frank, her fiance, died suddenly and unexpectedly. And then a couple of years later, her mom died. And I think she was probably trying to figure out what this new version of her future looked like. And so her and her dad and her brother, they moved around a little and kind of bopped all over. They ended up in Hawaii at one point. They all kind of got island fever and eventually decided to come back to the States. And when they did come back, they split up. So her brother and her dad went to Florida and Peggy went to Colorado. And probably because they'd lived there before, it felt familiar to her. And I know that no one sees something like this coming, but there's something about the timing of this that feels especially cruel. Because just 2 days before Peggy was murdered, she called her dad. And she told him, "Dad, I had this dream that I moved to Florida to be with you. I was so happy. I feel like that's where I'm supposed to be. Can I move there to Florida?" And her dad said, "Of course. Wherever we are, you are welcome. That is your home." But Peggy couldn't just drop the phone and go. That's not real life. She had a job. She had an apartment. She had all these things that she would have to wrap up. But fast forward 2 days, and instead of helping her plan a move, her dad and her brother were now planning her funeral.
You feel like you've fallen into an abyss. One day you have sure footing and things are stable and she's going to be down there and our friends down there were going to find her a job, to help her find a job, and she was going to live with us and be a bright spot in the house, and we'd be a family, to an abyss, like going into the ocean. You can't breathe and you just sink away, far away, without stopping. And so now your life is changed forever. What do? Hopes and desires they go out the window. Now you have to start a new life. And then after that, my dad started to get sick. Now I'm dealing with my dad that is dying, because the doctor pulled me in. He said, "Your dad maybe has 6 months." And I just looked at him and I said, "What?"
So Tom and his dad, they end up moving to Colorado so Tom could take care of his dad, also so they could be close to the investigation. But they weren't really getting a ton of updates. They kind of just got the party line, this is active and ongoing. But that became harder and harder to believe as a lot of time went on, and really hard to believe when out of nowhere, Tom gets this call from someone at the police department who's like, "Hey, we have a bunch of your sister's stuff. If you want to come get it, we'll probably just get rid of it, up to you."
Which the only thing police would have that's belonged to Peggy is evidence.
Fully evidence. But he's like, "Yeah, we'll take anything you have." So he goes down to the police station. They take him to this garage across the street where they pull up the doors and they pull out 2 plastic bags with 2 paper bags inside and just hand it to him. And when he gets home, him and his family start to open it up and go through it, but they realize, this stuff still has blood spatter on it. So they have this moment where they're like, "I'm pretty sure we shouldn't have this."
Right.
And they kind of try their best they can to package it back up and store it in case, but in case of what? Because nobody comes asking about the evidence. Nobody comes asking about Peggy. And most of the updates that they're getting are from the media. When those even happen, few and far between. So it seems like nothing on the surface is happening. And behind the scenes, it's really a lot of the same. Jim Broderick is still convinced that Tim Masters killed Peggy. And in all that time, where it's years now, Tim had been busy growing up. When he was 18, he joined the Navy, just like his dad. And for him, this was his chance to start over, to have a clean slate, to not be the kid suspected of murder. He could go, put his head down, do the work. And that's what he did. Day in, day out, month after month, year after year, all the way up until 1992.
I'm told to report to the Master at Arms first thing in the morning the next day. I'm like, well, this is weird. I report to the Master at Arms office the next day, and the E4 that's assigned to escort me somewhere is like, should I put him in handcuffs? They're like, no, that's not necessary. And I'm going, what the hell? Handcuffs? He takes me over to the Navy Intelligence Office in Philadelphia, and there I'm met by 3 detectives from Fort Collins Police, Hal Dean, Jim Broderick, and Linda Wheeler. And I proceeded to endure about a day and a half of interrogations. I didn't recognize them right. I didn't know Linda Wheeler. I didn't recognize them until, so Jim Broderick had this habit of wearing reddish colored deodorant, and he had pit stains. And when I saw the pit stains, I recognized him. And so I remember my thought was, what the hell? I can't believe 5 years later, I'm still being harassed over this. I didn't have anything to do with this. But I was still under the mindset of, especially, I'm just an E4 in the Navy. I really treated authority with respect, and Linda Holloway, she's Linda Wheeler at the time, Jim Broderick, they were still authority. I still treated them with respect, and I kept telling myself they're just doing their job. After the interview with Linda Wheeler, I had put it all behind me. I thought it was over, and I thought the Fort Collins Police knew I didn't do it, so I didn't even think about it.
When investigators came out of that meeting with Tim, they were split in their thinking. I don't know what Hal thought, but Linda left thinking, no, this isn't our guy. We've got this all wrong. Jim Broderick, though, was more convinced than ever. So in 1996, he reopens the investigation, and after some time, by golly, he's got it. And so on August 10th, 1998, 27-year-old Tim is at home in California. He's out of the Navy by this point, and he gets this knock on his door. And he gets up to get it. Before he can even reach the door is open, and there is this police officer standing right in front of him.
And he said, "Are you Tim Masters?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're under arrest." I said, "What? What for?" And he wouldn't tell me. And he handcuffed me, and as he's taking me out the door, Jim Broderick meets me there, and he goes, "You're under arrest for the murder of Peggy Hettrick." And I went, "Phew, what the hell? You gotta be kidding me." It was a complete shock.
It was a shock to everyone. I mean, I think people were looking side to side, wait, what did we miss? What do they have that they didn't have before?
What's new? Yeah.
Well, Tim goes to county to talk to his lawyer, and he realizes nothing. What they have are his drawings and a star witness to talk about the drawings.
Lieutenant Broderick provided me with approximately 2,200 pages of drawings and narratives produced by this young man before and immediately after the sexual homicide. This is a voluminous amount of material. In my 18 years of doing this kind of work, I have never seen such voluminous productions by a suspect in a sexual homicide. And that tells us that he was preoccupied with sexual violence, with sexually sadistic images, with images of domination and degradation of women, and he was also fascinated by knives. After spending 6 months on the case, I felt I understood the motivations for this homicide, and that I had become convinced that Timothy Masters was the individual that had committed this homicide.
Reid Meloy without ever having spoken to Tim in those 6 months, decided that Tim killed Peggy, and specifically that it was a case of displaced matricide.
Which matricide is killing your mom, and displaced in this case would mean like Peggy equals Tim's mom?
Yes, and it's not like Tim hated he loved his mom, right? Like, we haven't talked about his mom, though, because by the time Peggy was murdered, his mom had been dead for 4 years. And it was really unexpected. Like, his mom got sick. His dad was like, I'm going to take her to the hospital. And then she just never came home. I mean, I think they thought she had the flu or something, which, as you can imagine, is super traumatic for a young kid, super formative. And it did happen. Her death happened almost like 4 years to the day of Peggy's murder. So their theory becomes that he is out there in this field for some reason in the early morning hours, and he sees Peggy walking home, and he sees specifically Peggy's red hair, and it triggers him. It reminds him of his mom's red hair, and he lashes out and kills her.
Which, like, is a theory, but his mom doesn't have red hair, Ashley?
Britt, she does not even have red hair. Like, this is what's wild. Her hair looks brown in this picture, and no one cares. This is what they go to trial with. They go to trial with the drawings, this expert witness to talk about the drawings, and the defense in all of this, like throughout the trial, only calls one expert witness, but not because they're doing a bad job.
Because there's nothing else to, like, refute.
Their one expert witness is just to refute the drawing stuff. So it feels like there's no case here, and it feels like everyone can see where this is going.
As I was standing there, I was thinking, I'm going home. I'll be going home after today. And then the jury came out, and I kind of knew something was off. None of the jury would make eye contact with me. I'm like, oh God. And then the judge asked, have you reached a verdict? And the foreperson on the jury says, we have. And they hand it to the judge, and the judge reads it. Tim Masters, you have been found guilty. And so the media at the time described me as being completely emotionless as the verdict is read. It wasn't a lack of emotion, it was complete shock. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I just got convicted of murder. And they cuffed me, they took me to the county jail, and now I know I'm going to prison. So the judge sentenced me to life in prison with possibility of parole after 40 years. Oh, it was awful. It was like a world-ending event. Like, your life is over.
Over the past year, Britt, we've covered more potential and confirmed wrongful convictions than I think ever before. And we've been really fortunate to play some roles in, like James Reyes's exoneration. We just this last year did a $1 million endowment to help start the Indiana branch of the Innocence Project, because we're realizing that this is happening all the time. And it's not always this obvious as it is in Tim's case, but it is happening, and we have to fix it. And I don't mean you and me sitting here on this couch, like in our studio. I mean we, as in the crime junkie community. You guys listening, you are the jurors. You are the voters. You are the ones in your community making change, making decisions, making things happen. And I know that it can feel so overwhelming. Like, anytime there is a big problem and you realize a system is broken, it's like, how am I as one person going to fix this? But it takes one person, and you don't have to fix it like overnight. Like, that's not how stuff happens, right? Like, you have to find the one thing that you care about and just take the one next step. And in this one, to figure out who killed Peggy Hettrick, the thing is Tim's wrongful conviction. And in a weird twist that we don't see very often, even Peggy's family wasn't super sold on the idea that Tim did it. They sat through the trial, and at the end, they didn't understand a conviction just based on drawings, but they had this mentality of something that we've said on the show before, well, there must be something the police know that we don't know.
They couldn't have taken him to trial, convicted him on just this.
They wouldn't have arrested him just on that. But they could, they would, and they did. And so Tim gets carted off to Buena Vista Correctional Complex, where every day He wakes up in a cage for a crime he didn't commit. He takes classes, he works out, he gets a job in prison. All the while, his defense team is filing appeal after appeal. Appeals that are getting denied by the Court of Appeals, appeals that get denied by the Supreme Court of Colorado.
Which we talk about appeals a lot in our episodes, but I think it's easy to forget how expensive it is. It costs money to fight for your life like this.
Exactly, which is why at some point, Tim no longer even has lawyers, and he's doing more appeals on his own, which if he wasn't optimistic before, I mean, the system like took any optimism out of him. But lawyers couldn't get these things through the court system. Like, he's learning how to file an appeal for the first time at the same time he's trying to learn how to use Microsoft Word. He is less optimistic than ever. And what happened to Tim and what happened to Peggy, I mean, it not only changed Tim's life and Tim's outlook, it changed the lives and outlook of so many people, including Linda Wheeler, one of the early detectives. She saw what happened and she was so upset by it because, I mean, not only did she believe he shouldn't have been convicted in the first place, but then to watch these appeals, these systems we have in place for checks and balances to not work. She said she did get that feeling I was talking about earlier where it's like, the system is so broken. What am I as one person going to do to help it, even on the inside?
Right.
And she got so discouraged that she ended up turning in her badge. She had a complete career change because she just felt so overwhelmed by it. But it is just one person that changes everything in this case. And this is my shout to crime junkies, because it's not an FBI agent. It's not a detective. It's not anyone with a badge or a lawyer. It is a random CPA named Taylor Maris, who is just like you and me and everyone listening. One day he was watching this crime show, one of those crime shows we all grew up on. And as he's watching it, he sees the drawings, right? And he has this moment where he's like, ooh, I too made drawings I wouldn't want the world to see, but I'm not a killer. And he said that as he's watching, he kept waiting for that moment for them to show the thing that makes Tim guilty. What's the piece of evidence? And he's like, I'm waiting. And then the show ends. And after it ends, he's like, oh my God, someone should do something. I should do something. And so he takes just that one next step. He didn't know what to do, but his one next step is he wrote to Tim in prison. And he's like, listen, I see it. How can I help? And Tim's like, man, I don't know, but if there is someone that can help, you have to get Linda Wheeler. Go talk to Linda Wheeler. So Taylor takes the next step and he writes to Linda.
He said, you don't know me, but do you remember Tim Masters? I said, sure. He goes, well, do you think he's possibly innocent? And I said, yeah, I really do. But what can I do? I'm done. I'm not even a cop anymore. And he said, I talked with him. I just communicated with him by a letter. And he said, I bought all the transcripts of the trial, $900 worth. But he said, they don't mean anything to me because I don't read legalese. He said, could I send them to you? And for the first time, I sat there and read what happened at the trial. And I was infuriated because I knew this case and I knew the jury had not heard the truth. And at that point, I went, okay. So I contacted Maria Lou, who was Tim's attorney. And I said, you want my help? They said, yeah. I said, okay, but I know what I had to do is I had to put back on a badge because I knew I wouldn't have any credibility as a civilian.
Now, as you can imagine, Fort Collins PD is not welcoming Linda back with open arms.
She's telling them they're wrong.
Yeah, she's trying to upend a case that they're overdone with. It's solved.
Yeah.
So she ends up going to work for a DA's office with the understanding that she's going to work on Tim's case part-time. Now, she knows by now a lot of time has passed, and if they're going to point the finger at someone else or even just prove Tim didn't do it, the best way to do that is DNA, something they didn't have access to in 1987, but they do now. And she remembers meeting this woman named Selma at a conference before. And Selma and her husband, Richard, have this independent lab out in Holland. And independent is key because at this point, they trust freaking nobody.
Yeah.
And so now the wild part is like, they can't just go testing stuff. Like most crime junkies will know this, but if you were wrongfully convicted and you think there's DNA evidence, you do not have the right to just test it on your own.
The prosecution essentially owns the rights to the evidence against you.
Yeah, the people who put you there. Now, luckily, there's been enough like sus stuff happening that Fort Collins PD has recused themselves. Larimer County, which is the DA's office, has recused themselves. So there is a new DA that they're going to have to appeal to, a guy named Don Quick. And they're hoping like this guy has no dog in the fight other than just wanting justice.
Mhm.
So Selma and Richard come to the U.S. They do this like 4-hour presentation in front of Don Quick. And by the end of it, Don's like, yes, I love you, love the lab, love what you're doing, like go justice. But guess what happens next? That DNA evidence they were going to send off gets destroyed.
And I just want to point out exactly what you said. This happens next. So this evidence destruction happens after they get permission to test it. It's not like, oops, we don't have the evidence anymore. It's gone. It's, oh, you
No.
want it? We're getting rid of it.
Which is like they were already, Tim and his team were already suspicious that something sus was going on. And now they're more sure of it than ever. So they do end up finding some stuff that they can send off. At some point, they had gone back to Tom and gotten the stuff that they gave back to him. Like
the evidence?
They're like, you shouldn't have this. He's like, I know. So they like at least collect that. Thank God he saved it. And they end up sending some stuff off for testing. And at the same time, because they're convinced something like very fishy is going on, his lawyers make a request for a new trial based on the accusation that Tim's rights were violated. And they make 4 important points in this filing. Number 1, they say crucial evidence was withheld from Tim's defense team. And they point to 2 things. They say specifically the prints, and I think they're talking about the shoe prints in the field, the Tom McCann ones by the pool of blood on the curb. Apparently they never knew. Like his defense team never knew that those existed. The second thing that they didn't know existed was that first FBI profile that the police had done that said, Tim is not your guy. Didn't know that that was a thing. That kind of just went away, which would have been really helpful in a trial. Their second point in this filing was the whole DNA destruction thing. Like,
There's that.
And then the third is apparently there was like a mishandling of some skin cell DNA that they had. So some evidence that they had, but not only destroying things, then you're mishandling things. Like so much is useless. The fourth is that they ignored other viable suspects who were not Tim. Because make no mistake, they did not just pick Tim out of a void. There were other people that looked a lot more promising than Tim that his defense team never knew about. And I'm going to be getting into those people in a moment. But those are their 4 points. And as they're uncovering all this and filing this, I mean, they found out other things as well. Like the police were basically waging psychological warfare on this kid. So remember how I told you that in the first month of the investigation, the newspaper's showing up every day. It's like, we've got our guy, we're honing in. Turns out that was not real. The Fort Collins police was making a fake front page of the newspaper, just one, putting it on the newspaper and delivering that newspaper to Tim's house.
Literal fake news on his doorstep.
Mm-hmm. And their whole theory about matricide, right, is Tim's so upset about his mother's death that it caused all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly they know that he would be upset. They had his mother's obituary reprinted over and over. They would cut it out, put it in envelopes, and then leave those envelopes around for Tim to find. And then when that didn't work in the very first early days or whatever, come the 1-year anniversary of Peggy's murder, they concocted this scheme. Some might call it an operation. I say no. It's a scheme. And a lot of the paper trail of this has been lost along the way, so much in this case.
Convenient.
But what is left behind is it's bizarre. So Fort Collins authorities basically reached out to the FBI around the 1-year anniversary and was like, hey, we feel like we have this guy. We can't prove that he's violent, but we feel like if we put him in the right situation, we can push him to be, and other people will see what we see. But we're afraid that if we push him too far, like if he might kill someone again. So we need you watching him. But if it goes too far, you have to pretend like this didn't happen. We didn't do this. You didn't do this. Like, we all had nothing to do with whatever it is he does. And the FBI's like, got it. And they're like, yeah, but also if he does nothing and we look dumb.
Can't have that happen.
Yeah, like pretend it didn't happen. And they're like, got it. And obviously nothing happened. But it just shows you like the mind games they were playing with this, at the time, child. Yes. So this request for a new trial gets filed. The DNA stuff gets sent off. And even now, Tim is still not optimistic. Like, everything that can go wrong for him has. Why would this be any different? Even when everyone around him is telling him they think it will be.
So I'm in the unit. All of a sudden, the whole facility locks down for some reason. And they lock down a lot. You just assume a fight broke out somewhere, somebody got hurt, whatever. So I'm sitting in my cell, and my case manager comes up while everybody's locked down, and he says, Tim, your lawyer just called. She wants you to call her back. I'm like, okay, I'm locked down. What am I going to do? He says, I'll try and get you out here in a minute. So he goes down, then he comes back a little bit later, they take me out. Or no, he goes back down to talk about it, and the news comes on, and there's an announcement from the special prosecutors in my case, and they announce that they're going to dismiss the case against me, and I'll be released on a PR bond. And I'm like, and everybody in the unit was cheering, yeah, you're going home, Masters, you're out of here. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to talk to the lawyer later today. We'll find out for sure. Because at this point, I'm so pessimistic, I don't even believe what I just saw on the news. And then I go down to the case manager's office. He calls my lawyer, Maria Lou, and she says, you're out of there. They're letting you go. So, ironically, I made it. I wasn't in prison for quite 10 years, but I was in there almost 10 years. And, oh man, it was weird. They had, my lawyers bought me a suit out of their own pocket, and I got to wear a suit. They talked the sheriff into letting them release me from the courthouse rather than coming back to the county jail to be processed. So I went in there and they released me out of the courthouse. That never happens in Colorado. If you get released, you got to go back to the county jail and wait around while they process you. And they let them release me from the courthouse. And my entire family was there. My family was so big that they couldn't fit in the courtroom, and the courtroom was packed anyway with people. So they had my family go back in the judges' chambers. And when the hearing started to release me, all my family started walking out, and there was my sister. I almost broke out in tears when I saw my sister. It was a good day.
That good day was January 22nd, 2008. He was let out of prison, charges were dropped. But crime junkies know that doesn't mean he's considered to be innocent, and the DA can refile charges if they want to. Well, they definitely don't want to. At some point, the DNA stuff that they had sent off comes back with a couple of partial profiles. None of it matches Tim. And the case that they had built, even the little bit of one they had, is falling apart, right? The people were hiding things, they were lying, his rights were violated. So by June of 2011, Tim is fully exonerated. And he goes on to sue a lot of the people who helped put him in prison for so long, including Jim Broderick and Jolene Blair and Terry Gilmore. Terry and Jolene were the prosecutors at the time, but by the time Tim is suing them, they were judges. Mm-hmm. And what I find so interesting is that in this time, when Jim is being sued or even looked into, he's on paid leave. After 2 years, he ends up resigning. And even though 2 grand juries find him guilty of perjury, the charges get dropped. And the judges, at least this is happening during an election year, they don't get reelected, but they don't get so much as a slap on the wrist. The other big win is for Tim, is he gets to settle for about $10 million, which is great for him. And I keep wondering, why is no one asking who else?
Right.
Like, they're not looking into the prosecutors at the time. And just so you know, like, those three weren't the only ones Tim sued. He sued, like, the city. He sued a lot of people. Those were just, like, the three main people. But no one is asking if this happened to anyone else. It's like they paid him out and they just wanted this to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, we reached out to Jim Broderick, Jolene Blair, Terry Gilmore for a statement. Didn't hear back from Jim Broderick. Jolene Blair said she didn't want to talk about the case. Terry Gilmore, actually, for the longest time, we didn't hear back from until like midway through the tour.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said was basically that he really believed in Tim's guilt at the time. He said that the way the system worked and the way that like evidence was numbered or copied or whatever, it should have been really obvious if something was missing. And when we asked him what he thought about Tim's guilt or innocence now, he wouldn't tell us. So that's what he has to say. And in an interesting piece of gossip that has nothing to do with this, obviously when we look up people to like try and figure out where they are, we like try phone numbers, we try emails. Facebook is like a great way to like reach people for comment. It turns out now Jim Broderick and Jolene Blair are dating and went to Italy. Like, it's wild.
It has nothing to do with this case, but it's something that we know.
I know. I know. And I was like, maybe I'm being like a petty Betty, but when I told people on tour, the collective like gasp, I was like, oh no, yeah, they're here for the goss too. So they're living their lives again, no repercussions there. And Tim, all he wanted was to move on and live his life as well. Mm-hmm. So when he settled his lawsuit, he moved to have the records in his case sealed. Like, he didn't want people bringing this up over and over.
Which he deserves that.
Absolutely. It does make it really hard when I want to bring it up. Even with, like, Tim's blessing and Tom's blessing and everyone who participated. Luckily, we were able to get some of the investigative files, though. And those revealed some really interesting things. Because like I said earlier, there were other very viable suspects in this case, far more viable than Tim. When talking about people we should be looking at, viable potential suspects, the first that comes up is Peggy's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Matt Zoellner, who was 29 in 1987. And every detective, I think, has their, like, person, right, that they look into the most. And for Linda Wheeler, it is Matt. Now, Ray Martinez, one of the detectives we talked about who was, like, first on the scene for Peggy's case last time, he said a lot of people were quick to write Matt off. Maybe because of his behavior, like he was acting how they expected. Maybe because he had an alibi. If you remember, Matt said that he had met that woman, maybe Sean. Again, just met her, didn't even remember her name, but he was with her till last call. Then she's at his place till like 3:30 in the morning. And a lot of what you'll see about Peggy's death is that she died between 1 and 3 a.m., which, yes, Matt would have an alibi. Except when we got access to a lot of the investigative files, what we realize is in the report, it's actually a wider range. I mean, they settle on 1 to 3, but the true range of time is between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., meaning that there's potentially an hour and a half, 2 hours that Matt is unaccounted for if she died like in those like later time frame. The other thing, which I haven't told anyone yet, been saving this up my sleeve, is that when Peggy was found, in her purse was a note that she had written to Matt, seemingly that very evening she died. And so, Britt, I'm going to have you read the note.
Matt, I need your help. Sharon has got my keys and isn't home. No answer. If I have to knock on your door at 2, please don't be a grump. I don't want to spend the night sleeping in the hall. Peg. But this note is in Peggy's bag. Like, Matt doesn't have it.
No, this is in her bag. And so there are a couple of lines of thinking around this. So we know she gets locked out, right? So I think everyone's thinking she gets locked out, she writes this note, and then one of two things happens. Either she goes and like puts this on Matt's door, And then she goes out, she ends up getting back into her place and then goes back to Matt's and collects the note because she no longer needs to show up at his place at 2 a.m. Or she writes the note, goes out, ends up getting back into her place before she ever drops the note off.
Doesn't need the note at all.
She's in, it doesn't even matter anymore. And it's like a moot point. It's like living in her purse and maybe she forgot about it. I don't know.
And did Matt see the note? Like, what did he say about it?
That's the thing. So based on the files that I've seen, it doesn't appear like they ask him about it, which like maybe they're just writing it off. But to me, it feels really interesting. Like, did she plan on coming to your place? Did you know she was planning on coming?
Did she mention it to you? Like something, yeah.
Right. And we know they spoke, and that like her coming to his house was never a part of the story he told when they spoke. So just a reminder of his story. So Matt actually lived even closer to the prime minister than Peggy did. So there are two possibilities here. So Matt drove that night because he was kind of bopping around to different places. And he said that when he got to the prime minister, Peggy was arriving at the same time. They are like at the bar, they're chatting for a little bit, like everything's normal. And then his date, this girl he's supposed to meet up with, comes. Again, maybe Sean is he thinks is her name. They just met that night. And he says that he offered Peggy a ride. She said yes originally, but then like at some point in the evening, he went to the bathroom. He's coming out. Peggy's leaving. So he's like, oh, she must have changed her mind, whatever. He stays till last call with maybe Sean, and then they go back to his place till 3 or 3:30. Now, he does tell police, though, that even though their conversation was normal, it was great, she made mention, Peggy did, that she was seeing someone new during this time, which he thought police should know.
Which you haven't mentioned that at all. So my question is like, was she actually seeing someone, or was she seeing her on-again, off-again boyfriend Matt with someone new? She's like, oh, I too am newly in love. He's so hot and so rich.
So tall, better looking than you.
Don't even worry about me. Yeah. Like, was she bluffing?
I don't know. I don't know. So there's like some indications that maybe she was seeing someone, like casually. I think it's also important to know that like Matt is that guy she would always go back to there in Colorado. And so much so that I found out that earlier in that week, I mean, they had dinner together. Also, apparently, though, as far as I can tell, not something that police asked him about, which is like, seems like a miss to me because like they're very much in each other's lives. And like, what did you talk about? What were the days leading up to it? I don't know.
Well, and the police don't ask about the note. They don't ask about this dinner within like the week before she died. Did they even ask about his alibi?
They did. No, they did check his alibi. They found maybe Sean, and our reporter Emily actually found her all these years later and spoke to her. Turns out, maybe Sean, her name is actually Dawn.
Matt, you were so close.
So close. And her story is interesting. It adds a little bit of context, a little bit of color. She says that they really did just meet earlier that night. They had saw each other in another bar, and she said they recognized each other because Matt, like a while ago, had sold her a car. So like they'd been in the same orbit before, but didn't even know each other's names, clearly.
Yeah.
She said Matt came over to her and was like, hey, when you're done with your friend, you should come to Prime Minister and hang out with me, which is what she did. She says she shows up later in the evening, and when she walks in, Matt is talking to this other woman who she figures out later is Peggy. Didn't know Peggy at the time. And she said she kind of hangs back for a little while and waits, but a couple minutes go by, he's still talking, so she decides to approach him. As soon as she approaches, Peggy turns at the bar and starts talking to the guy next to her. And so Dawn just made the assumption that Peggy was with that other guy. And Matt doesn't introduce Dawn or anything. He just is like, hey, go get a table. So Dawn goes to get a table for 4, thinking that maybe the other couple is going to join them, but just Matt comes back. And she said she didn't ask him about it. She didn't even ask him about the woman when she realized Matt's kind of keeping an eye on her all night. They just met. She doesn't know the history, but she's not going to dig too deep. They're having a decent time. And they do. They stay till last call. She goes home with Matt. They talk. They kiss a little. She says the night ends for a combination of reasons. He's doing the I gotta work in the morning. And then he also makes this comment about how he hates kids. Not dislikes kids, hates them. And Dawn is like, well, I have one of those. So this probably isn't gonna work out. And so she ends up leaving. But when she talked to us, there was something else that she told us that really stood out to her. She said that when she was in his apartment that night, it felt strange because she said it was so clean. Like, not just clean for a boy kind of apartment, but like, she's like, I couldn't find, a piece of clothing on the closet floor. There was not a fork to be found in the sink. Like, it felt like no one lived there, which was weird at the time, whatever. But she said what was really strange for her was that police brought her back at some point years later, and they were asking her questions about Matt's apartment specifically. And they were asking her, like, had you seen a broken coffee table? Had you seen some spots on the floor? And they're like showing her pictures of the apartment. I think like you, we talked about this. We're like originally imagining like a shattered coffee table.
Yeah, when I hear broken table, it is a broken table, very obviously.
It's like this like piece of wood propping up one of the legs.
Like one of the legs is broken and now it has like a piece of wood.
Fully something my husband would like do and then be like, it's fine for years if it was his apartment.
Yes.
So, and then the spots, like, they're not like overtly blood or anything. There's just a couple of them. I don't know if they ever get those tested. And again, Dawn is saying, no, I never saw any of that because, again, it's so clean. But she said that wasn't even really the takeaway for her. As they're showing her these pictures, the takeaway for her is like, that's not the apartment I was in. Which, it was like full body chills when she was telling us that. And it's not like it was a completely different. She said it looked the same. The layout was the same.
But this one looked lived in.
So lived in. I mean, if you see the pictures, there's like laundry everywhere. There's like stuff on the counters. Like, make no mistake, this dude lives here.
Which, I don't want to discredit Dawn's memory at all, but like, we know human memory is incredibly flawed. There's a million statistics on it. I won't go through all of them, but there's one from the Innocence Project that's something like 70% of wrongful convictions are like come down to witness misidentification or misremembering. And that's like in the most perfect of circumstances, right? Like, in this case, like, it's in the middle of the night. It's dark. They'd been drinking like this.
And when they're showing her these pictures, I mean, this is like years later,
right?
Too. So yes, I mean, there could be like, I don't even know what to like make of this memory other than it's just so strange. But there were other strange things about Matt as well. Like, when they went to talk to him the first like day or two after they found Peggy, they did search his car and his place. And apparently they seized some wet clothes and shoes from his car and wet clothes from his apartment, and not like damp. I mean, they said it looked like he had gone swimming in these things. But strangely, like a couple of days later, Matt comes asking for those things back, and they just give them back. Like, sorry, we didn't like wash and fold them for you.
I mean, you say strangely, but a couple days later, they were all in on Tim.
I know. But when you think about, like, at some point, I don't know what was happening years later. I think it was like probably the grand jury. They're looking at these pictures. They're asking Dawn about them. I think the implication was, did something happen in Matt's apartment after Dawn left, right? Like, we got this maybe 1.5 to 2 hours. Did a table break? Did these spots come after you left the house? I point that out specifically because there's one other thing that they collected early on that I think is important. Outside of Matt's apartment, they also found some footprints that matched the shoes Peggy was found in when she was killed, and a pile of like 11 cigarette butts in the brand that Peggy was known to smoke, which outside of his place. Which
the shoe prints, I can kind of like excuse, right? Like, she has this note. She might have been there to drop it off, to then to pick it up, so it was in her purse. Like, okay, but the cigarette butts, like, that is a stakeout amount of cigarette butts. Like,
I know. And when they talk to her friends, and this is like the little piece that comes out in that, like, when I talk about the 2D image of her in the newspaper, when they talk to her friends did say, it wouldn't have been that unusual. She gets jealous of, like, when it comes to Matt. It wouldn't have been weird if she saw him with another woman that night, and then she went to his place we know she left ahead of them. Did she stake it out to see if he brought Dawn home? Did she stay and see if Dawn stayed or if Dawn left? And if she was still there when Dawn left, then did something happen? Was there a confrontation at Matt's apartment? The problem with that is,
it doesn't fit the theory that the attack happens in the field.
I know. Like, there's pieces that are missing, because in my mind, like, if something happens with Matt, like, it is a heat of the moment, like, passion thing, it's hard for me to imagine a world where either something happens in his apartment, or even he like gets her in the car and then takes her to this place where someone could see something, takes her out of the car, stabs her, drags her. I can't make it add up.
It doesn't make sense. And I guess my question too is, was Matt a violent person? Was their relationship volatile? Because they've been on and off for a while. Like, was there a history of that?
There's nothing like reported that I can find. In Matt's like criminal history, he doesn't have anything violent. I mean, there's like some DUIs and stuff like that, but no like domestic charges, nothing like that. So, which is why I go back to, I think if something happened between them, it was heat of the moment. But like, it's hard for me to imagine it happening at Matt's. And then if not, it's hard for me to imagine how Matt gets her in the middle of that field.
I mean, the biggest question, does Matt have Tom McCann shoes?
No. So they didn't find any Tom McCann dress shoes. They did take note of like a pair of boots that were like propped up against his couch. But Don says those were the boots he was wearing the night Peggy died. Mm-hmm. They're not the prints that match anything in the field. And I get the sense that like those were his nice shoes. Like he didn't have
not
a
like, dress shoe guy.
Right. And so maybe for all of those reasons, he didn't have Tom McCann's. He maybe had an alibi. He was acting how they expected him to act. Early on, people wrote him off, even though he too, like Tim, failed a polygraph. And he failed the question, do you know who killed Peggy Hettrick?
Like the question.
Yeah. But the polygrapher decided that he was probably telling the truth. And so that's Matt. Now, the other person we came across in the case file was a guy named Donnie Long. So the same year that Peggy was murdered, there were 2 more murders. 39-year-old Linda Holt was stabbed 9 times, bound, gagged, tied to a tree. Now, like Peggy's case, there was no sexual assault. But unlike Peggy's case, there was no mutilation to Linda. Then a couple of months after her, 30-year-old Mona Hughes is murdered. She's stabbed 14 times. No sexual assault. Again, though, no mutilation. Now, pretty quickly, police kind of pull Peggy out of this, even though you've got 3 cases that happen within 9 months of each other, within 30 miles, in an area that doesn't really see violent crime.
Well, and all the victims are like kind of in the same age range, 37, 39, 30. My crime junkie brain goes, their last names all start with H. Hettrick, Hughes, Holt.
That's Deck Investigates brain. I know, but like, I think it's about the mutilation. I think that's the why very early on they were like, Peggy doesn't fit in this pattern. And they end up finding the guy responsible for Linda and Mona. They end up getting this Donnie Long guy. Donnie ends up confessing to Linda and Mona's murders. So they at least do the bare minimum, though. And like when he confesses to these, they like circle back and they're like, hey, you're saying you did these 2 things. Did you do this other thing? He's like, no, I didn't. And they're like, okay, thank you, bye. Like truly the bare minimum.
And we're just out here like believing serial killers like that. This is not the first time we've seen this happen.
No.
But it always confuses me, shocks me.
This happened recently where I'm like working on this case out of Washington that I've been working on for like 2 years. And me and one of our reporters, Emily, we had a call with the FBI because we're like, listen, we're not saying it's Israel Keys, but here's like 20 things we find very odd that we like feel like someone other than us should know. And the agent was like, yeah, like, okay, we'll talk to you, but like, don't need to hear it. He only killed 4 people in the state. And I'm like, wait, how do you know he only killed 4 people in Washington? I feel like that's like news.
Yeah.
And he's like, but he told us that. And I was like, Israel Keys told? So
of all the bad guys to believe, we're believing
Israel Keys.
Israel Keys. Okay.
So he said he didn't do it, so they think he didn't do it. We tried to write to him when he was in prison just to see if he would talk to us. We haven't heard back from him. Which brings me to the third person I want to go deep into. And I told you, everyone has like their person, like detectives. And for Ray Martinez, this next one is his. And for me, he's the person, whether or not he had anything to do with Peggy's case, I am very interested in. Because I think there is a much bigger story behind him. And that is local ophthalmologist, Dr. Richard Hammond. Now, in 1987, this dude is raising no red flags. He has a thriving practice. He has a wife, 2 teenage kids, like living the American dream. Except for, you know, the one red flag they raised about Tim in that he lived really close to the crime scene. In fact, you could see the crime scene from his primary bedroom window.
But he wasn't doodling.
No, God forbid. So, I mean, he was a part of the initial canvas where they came around. Did you see anything, hear anything? Him and his wife were home that night, but they didn't see or hear anything, and so they moved on. Again, no red flags. Plenty of red flags, though, come March of 1995. That's when a young woman at Colorado State University found this note card on their job board for someone who needed a house sitter. The Hammonds were going out of town. She was going to come house sit. She brought her friend with her, and, she's getting the tour of the house. Your room will be in the basement. You can use this bathroom, but, make yourself at home. Use the house, whatever. So her and her friend are there. They're hanging out. There's something weird about the basement bathroom. They keep hearing something. Now, I imagine if it were me and I was by myself, I would be I'll just use the upstairs bathroom.
But she's not alone. She has a friend with her.
Right. You got your crime junkie BFF with you, and you're today's the day we're going to solve the mystery.
Absolutely.
So they start snooping around, right? They get a flashlight. They're going all around the bathroom. And it's they turn the light on. They hear the sound. They turn the light off. There's no sound. On, off, on, off.
And I imagine that, one of them's at the light, and the other one's okay, shh, and kind of darting around the room, trying to hear the sound from where it's coming from.
Well, they end up getting a flashlight, and they realize that there are cameras in the vents.
Plural, cameras.
Cameras. But the cameras aren't set up in the bathroom. They're set up from the room next door. So they go out the hall and go to that room, but the knob is won't turn. It's locked. And again, if I were alone, I'd be is this where I stop? But you have your BFF with you.
I don't know how to pick a lock, but I'm about to find out.
So they get their paper clips, whatever. And as they're getting ready to pick this lock, what they realize is that even though it was locked, the knob wouldn't turn. When it was pulled shut, it didn't latch all the way. So all they have to do is push it open. And when they go inside, they see cameras. They see recording equipment. They see filing cabinets and a, quote, uncountable amount of videotapes. And that's when the one girl freezes and she's like, I think we need to phone a friend.
Yeah.
I think they're hoping that this isn't as bad as they think it is. Mm-hmm. But when they phone this friend and they call somebody who used to be a cop, he, quote, knows a lot about videotapes, very 1995. But he gets here and he's like, no, this is worse. We need to call the real police. Quickly, the real police descend on this place, and it's just worse than you could have imagined. I mean, they even find this index on top one of the filing cabinets, and it's got ages, names, dates. Is it a shower shot? Is it a toilet shot? Is it a close-up shot? And when I say close-up, this isn't just someone sitting on the toilet. I mean, this is zoomed into their genitals. And many of these names on the list are minors, kids his kids go to school with.
Well, and with the close-ups, it makes me think of Peggy. I mean, she had genital mutilation.
I know. And that's not the only thing they're piecing together. So because this is happening in the same place, it's a lot of the same people who were called for Peggy's case. One of them being Sergeant Ray Martinez. And he says when he first gets this call to respond, he's like, Hammond. Why do I know the name Hammond? And then it hits him. He's like, during our canvassing, we went to his house. And then all of a sudden, he's putting the pieces together.
So I'm tying this together. Weird cameras, crime scene, near the crime scene back then, and he's a doctor. And guess what we find in his closet? We start looking through his closet, and we find Tom McCann's shoes. Boy, does that ever ring a bell. And so we called up Broderick, this other detective did, and he refused to come out. He wouldn't come to the scene. He said, no, we already know who done it. But that's a moot point, basically. When Jim Broderick said that, and the officer told me about it, I was angry about it, because me as a past detective, you don't overlook anything. You flip over every stone that you can. You might be wrong where your lead was. Maybe this is something different. Why not look at what's it going to hurt, right? But he refused to come out, so I told the officer that, I said, let's just seize everything. Let's seize the tapes, seize the camera, seize those Tom McCann shoes, you know? So we did. We collected our own evidence and turned everything in. And it never went anywhere. And I think a day or 2 days later, he's found dead in a hotel in Denver. They said, from what I've learned, that when they found him, his whole body was shaved. He shaved all the hair off his head and his body, complete body, and disposed of it. So that to me is weird, other than he didn't want any trace evidence linked to him. Why would you do that if you didn't think you might have left something behind at a scene?
That to me is also weird.
Mm-hmm.
Full-on naked mole rat in a hotel room?
Dude, I don't know what to think of this. If you like look at what the people around him said, who were like supportive of him in a way, saying like he couldn't do anything violent, they would say that he was very into bodybuilding. I still try and find like old archives of like, were there competitions? Like, was this something he was actively doing? For how long? Because like, I want to know, is this guy nair smooth all the time or just on this day that he died?
Feels important.
I don't know. But the people who supported him, and support's the wrong word because nobody was like, well, we'll get there. But his wife basically was like, I didn't know like any of the videotape stuff was happening, but he's not capable of something violent.
But how would she even know? Like, she didn't know about the tapes. Like, how would she even have any idea of what he's capable of?
And that's the thing I have such a hard time understanding. Like, we tried reaching out to her. We weren't able to get in touch. But I don't know how, like, because she said she was totally blindsided. She, like, didn't have any idea what was happening in her home, which is just, like, quick PSA to people. Like, if your husband has a locked room in the basement.
Maybe go in it.
Of the home you share, you're allowed to ask questions. But I don't know what their dynamic was. I don't know. But though she paints, like, when they gave her immunity deal to talk, she paints, like, a very vanilla picture of their life. She says that, like, she would make dinner from scratch. He'd come home at 7 p.m. They'd eat dinner together as a family. Their kids would do homework. And then, like, they wouldn't even watch TV. Like, they were, all-American family.
I don't think PBS was showing what Hammond was into.
I don't think so either. But anyways, it seemed, like, again, she didn't, at least from what I've seen, didn't give any indication that there was, like, dark parts of her marriage. She was surprised by this. So he gets arrested. He gets released on a $5,000 bond. And it's when he's released that he goes to that Denver hotel and he dies by suicide. He has a cyanide drip to his leg that, is so corrosive, it gets like down to the bone. And it's interesting the way that things play out after he dies, because when I say like people like supported him, there were people who kind of came out of the woodwork, and there was like this battle when you look at the newspapers of like reporters reporting on what happened, and then people saying that they shouldn't because it's just making things worse. And it kind of all starts with Richard's suicide note. So I'm going to have you read that.
The media frenzy surrounding my arrest has caused immeasurable harm to many people, especially my family. I've lost everything, but I cannot survive the loss of my wife and son and daughter. My death should satisfy the media's thirst for blood so that hopefully everyone else who has been affected by this case can truly begin the process of healing. I love redacted family names very much. I am truly sorry for hurting you so deeply. Rich Hammond.
So he puts it on the media that, yes, I did this thing, but like I have to die because they're so bloodthirsty. They're making this bigger than it has to be, and they're hurting people, and like I'm just going to go away because of what they're doing.
Well, and not even what he did. He says like, who has been affected by this case, not by what he did.
That's true. So then this is when the back and forth comes, and there are people who come out in support of what he said, and like the media should just stop, we should drop it. Like there's this active campaign to just make this go away. Mm-hmm. And just to prove the point, I want you to read something, not the whole thing, but part of what was written by a woman named Pam Hurley Nagel in the paper.
It saddens me that the Coloradan and other media flits chose to feast on Richard Hammond's tragic plight. I don't condone his alleged behavior, which was limited to the privacy of his own home.
collective gasp. That's like the craziest part to me.
Yeah. But the media exploited a man and his family's vulnerability. Don't think anybody else's vulnerability was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Rich Hammond was a man and doctor who took time to replenish his society with quality medical care. What he allegedly did was wrong, but in the scheme of things, the hurt he caused was exaggerated after the media got its predatory claws in it.
Was it? Here's the thing. I don't think that's a question we can answer because of how things unfold next. So after his arrest and his death, they continue to find more things. They find a secret storage unit no one knew about with Rubbermaid tub after Rubbermaid tub of more videotapes, pornographic materials, receipts, sex toys. They find out he had a secret bank account that people didn't know about. They find this like waist belt contraption that like hooked onto his belt and had all these little like sharp instruments that came out of it. Like, what do you need that for? But the reason I say we don't know the extent is because after all this is collected, everything from his home, from this storage unit, it is all taken and over the course of like 8 hours, burned, like completely destroyed. And Jim Broderick, like some people were at least asking questions about this. And our guy Jim Broderick is back to give a quote to the Denver Post about why they destroyed all of this evidence in this case. And he said, quote, "Should we re-victimize all these women by telling them they are victims? So really, it's an effort to protect them, to preserve these victims' rights."
Oh, Ashley, words are important to me. They're important to you. They're important to our crime junkies. What he's saying here, like, I cannot make sense of it. Like, re-victimizing them by telling them that's not how that works.
No, the math isn't mathing. And the thing I have the biggest problem with is this idea, the last line, to preserve these victims' rights. That's why we destroyed this. By destroying it, and not like with their permission or anything.
I say, like, I get as a victim, like, wanting those tapes to be destroyed. If that existed of me, I wouldn't feel safe, even with the tape like that locked in an evidence locker. But I'd want the choice.
Yeah, they didn't have it. They made the choice for them to preserve their rights. But by destroying it, what they did was actually take away any future right they might have for repercussions. They can no longer go after Hammond's estate. Were there other people on those tapes? We'll never know that they could go after because, by the way, when they destroyed everything, they had not viewed most of it. Like, they just took it all away without knowing what was on the majority of those tapes, which is bananas to me. And the whole way that these were destroyed, when they looked into this went against every policy and procedure they had in place about how to deal with evidence. It just all goes up in smoke. Literally. They like burned it. Yes. And listen, Jim Broderick would have you believe that they did this for a noble reason. And I do think there are people out there doing noble things for noble reasons. I haven't seen a whole lot of them.
Would love to meet more.
Yes. But in the theme of always going a layer deeper, which is our new crime junkie life rule, I like to ask not just what happened, but why do we think it happened? Well, here's a fun fact. In the couple of days between when Hammond was arrested, but before he died, they were having to think about, like, taking this to a trial. Like, there could be a case around this. And they were going to have to appoint a special prosecutor because they quickly found out that members of the DA's office, quote, had been guests at Hammond's home and may have been videotaped.
Oh, I think we have our reason for why all of that evidence was destroyed.
But they are quick to write this off. Like, same way when Tim, right, when he gets exonerated, they're like, let's just make this go away. And when this happened, they wanted this to go away. So much so that they were even writing off stories that made no sense. Like, people were like, oh, he wouldn't have hurt Peggy because, like, he didn't even use a scalpel. Yes, he was a doctor in surgical precision, all that, but he didn't even use scalpels. But, like, a guy who he ran the practice with was like, yeah, we absolutely do. And there's an affidavit from a woman who's like, he literally used a scalpel on me. And just to show you how far under the rug they were pushing this thing. Everything in the paper, like at the time, was about the videotapes or whatever. Nobody publicly was connecting this guy to Peggy Hettrick in 1995. And nobody was telling Peggy's family about him, even behind the scenes. Tom didn't find out about Dr. Hammond until years later. And the way he found out was bananas.
I remember a few years ago, they talked about a doctor. I was coming out of the Village Inn with my friend, and he looked at the news box, Rocky Mountain News, and had Peggy's picture on the front cover of the newspaper. And he said, "Hey, Tom, that's your sister." And so he got the newspaper. We went back into the Village Inn. I read it. I skimmed over it and I went, "What? Who is this doctor? Nobody's ever told me about this guy."
So the defense never knew about any of that. Not just the Hammond stuff, but like so much of what we've talked about. And in looking at the file, when I say there's more to be done, I mean, I also was coming across names of people it doesn't seem like they really dug into. A guy named Greg Case, who she was like dating at the time. Derek Cordova, who she had gone out with in the past. A guy named Tim Matthews, who apparently liked Peggy and was jealous of Matt. And I'm not saying those guys had anything to do with anything, but to me, those are people who were clearly close to her, who hung out with her, who maybe were with her in like times leading up to her death.
They were in her circle.
I know. And so when I say that more can be done, like, I don't think we can just rely on DNA and like call it quits. I think there's going to have to be legwork. And I think there's still a lot of legwork that can be done even decades later.
Right. But we know that Tim was exonerated in part by the DNA evidence. So like whatever happened to those partial matches?
So we did get some partial profiles, and none of those matched him. So there were some important ones. There was one on the front waistband of Peggy's underwear. And everything we have comes from touch DNA, right? There was no like semen or bodily fluids. And I think their thinking was that the killer likely was the one who pulled her pants down. So maybe they'd get touch DNA. Mm-hmm. Then they got some samples from under her arms, coat, boots, pants. There was a single full profile on her sleeve, but like, guess what? It turned out to be the police who weren't wearing gloves. So
cool.
Cross that one out. And while it hasn't been on record that they've gotten DNA from like all three of the people I've talked about, right? Matt Zoellner, Donnie Long, Richard Hammond. I do know that they got one person's DNA for comparison. And it is comparison, right? There's no full profile to put into CODIS. Mm-hmm. And one of those three people did match the touch DNA on the underwear. Not all the places, but the touch DNA on the underwear. And that was Matt Zoellner.
So we have this partial match on one of the samples. Why isn't that DNA alone enough to charge him?
Well, right, like if it was Tim's, right, it totally would have been.
Yeah.
That's the question a lot of people are asking. And for Linda, she thinks it should be enough.
I want Matt Zoellner to know that I'm still after him. I want him to know that make up some little hiccup or something that in his life that he'll make a mistake that we can catch him on. But it's like when I know who did it and he's not held accountable and he's been free for 30-some years, that the Attorney General did all they could, and I really felt that they did. But it's like, but I'm not done, and I don't want to be silenced. There's still a wrong that was done, and I still feel like something good might come out of this case getting reopened and refocused on, that somebody might come up with something that's said or done that we didn't know about that allows us to take this case further and keep it open.
Now, I think it's important to note, I don't think that at this point you can take a case to trial just based on that one piece of DNA. There's a lot that has to be explained at this point. I mean, and again, it's touch DNA. You don't know how it got there, when it got there.
And it's only one of the profiles that was found on her.
Yes. And we know that they had contact, right? Like they're going to dinner. They saw each other that night. Mm-hmm. I think it is important. I think it is meaningful. And I think that is like when you talk about a lead that tells you where to focus, I think that's telling you where to focus. However, there is other DNA that's going to have to be explained away. You're going to have to prove it in a court of law, and there's legwork that can be done. You also have, when I think about DNA, the Missy Woods of it all. If anyone remembers our JonBenet Ramsey episode, there is a DNA tech in Colorado who was there from 90s to 2023. Her name's Missy Woods, and she was there was like
not following protocol, mishandling evidence,
exactly,
not storing things correctly,
right.
Not necessarily falsifying things, but really mucking up the system.
So all of her cases are getting called into
yeah.
question. I don't know if she touched this. And I know we sent some stuff to Holland, but stuff was stored in Colorado. Some of it was tested in Colorado. Again, I'm only saying all of this because while I think this DNA is important, you are going to have to back it up with legwork.
Well, and for me, Matt doesn't have this history of violence. Even if it was something that happened in the heat of the moment, she was mutilated with surgical precision.
I know.
That doesn't, you don't learn that in a heat of the moment situation.
We asked about that, and people who believe that Matt did this, they think that maybe he was trying to throw people off his trail by doing that.
But the precision of it.
I know. And listen, who's to say there isn't a world where someone killed Peggy and then someone else came along and did something, right? Richard Hammond had insomnia and could see that field from his bedroom window. I don't think he wants to call police and alert them to what he's doing in his place. You know what I mean? I'm not saying, I don't know, but it might not be. The reason that a lot of things might not fit is because maybe there isn't just one answer. And another problem that we're going to face when it comes to making a case is that you will have this Richard Hammond thing that is very open-ended.
And it can never be buttoned up.
Right. We don't know if Peggy was on one of those tapes because some powerful people made sure we would never know what was on those tapes, who was on those tapes. And if you came to the live show, this is where we started to wrap things up. But I mean, as a lot of people might have noticed by now, the theme of these stories is going a layer deeper. So while Britt and I were on tour, I sent some of our reporters back to Colorado to do some more digging, some more door knocking and boots on the ground work, mostly because I couldn't shake the feeling that there is more to this Dr. Hammond story.
As it relates to Peggy or something else?
I don't know. The way that everyone made it go away so fast and the operation we learned he had set up feels so much bigger. So Britt, we got our hands on some investigative reports from Hammond's case, and I was disappointed to see that police just straight up stopped investigating after he died.
I mean, not surprised, but
I
disappointed.
Again, at the time, they said it was all to protect the victims, blah, blah, blah. But the question I have is no one can say for sure that Hammond didn't sell or share the tapes. What we learned is that his video setup was professional, it was elaborate, and his tape catalogs were organized like a library. And Hammond would even label the tapes by date, by victim's initials. But some of the tapes were also labeled ready.
Ready for what?
I don't know. Distribution? To go somewhere? Our reporting team tracked down one of Hammond's victims, and she filled in some blanks for us. And prepare to be disappointed yet again, because she told us that not only did police never ask their opinions on destroying the evidence, which we assumed, but when detectives were interviewing the victims, they were asking these victims if they were in on it.
In on it? How exactly?
The cops were asking these teenage girls if they were performing for the cameras. Did anyone tell you where to stand and what to do? And on top of that, she said that Fort Collins PD never once offered to let these teen girls have a parent or trusted adult in the room with them during their interviews. So it just feels like the victims have never once had a voice in that case. Every decision was made for them, even after the cops basically treated them like suspects. Oh, and remember how I told you, we found out that, there was a file that said some of the DA's office had socialized at Hammond's, might be on the tapes, whatever. Well, when we finally got to track down Judge Terry Gilmore, that was obviously one of the things we asked him specifically about. We weren't able to talk to anyone else. And he confirmed that the destruction of the tapes did go against regular policy, and he admitted to knowing Dr. Hammond personally before his arrest. But he says that he only socialized with him one time, and that he was never at the doctor's home. And that's kind of where that ended.
Okay.
And then there's one more thing that I want to mention before we wrap things up on Hammond. So we got a hold of a woman who in 1988-ish went to the eye clinic where Hammond worked for an emergency. Like her son got like sandy snowball lodged in his eye or whatever. Now, Hammond is not their regular doctor, but he was the one on call that weekend. So they're alone in the eye clinic with him. And Dr. Hammond was treating the boy, he's like 9 or 10, and his mom had to use the restroom. So she went to the closest one that she could find, which was the men's stall. But Dr. Hammond came and like physically blocked her from using the men's restroom, and he insisted that she had to use the women's restroom. And she's like, okay, like whatever, dude.
Yeah.
And when she got inside and flipped the light switch on, she heard this like whirring.
So this is in 88.
Mhm.
No one knows and won't know for years
Mhm.
about Hammond's secret taping hobby.
And what they ended up determining at his house is like it's the light switch. So he like when you
Right.
turn it on, that triggered it to start recording. So he didn't even have to be there. And she's hearing this at his office. Now she says in the moment, she was certain it was a camera. Not even like years later, but in that moment. Like specifically one of those big cameras from the 80s that had that distinct sound when it turned on, specifically when it focused.
Mhm.
And she even flipped the light switch off because she was like so freaked out. She was like looking for a red light or any sign that she was being recorded.
Wait, did police find cameras at his practice? Or, I mean, did they even search it?
So it depends on who you ask. Ray Martinez told us that they didn't. But our reporters found an old article at the CSU archives that said they did search the doctor's office. But that article also had some other wrong information in it. So I don't really know for sure.
If we even know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Ray Martinez like worked the case. So like I want to trust him. But like it's also been so many years, you never know. So anyways, fast forward 7 years. And this woman is like seeing the headlines about Dr. Hammond's cameras in his basement. And she's like, she has this like, oh my God moment. Like what I thought was real.
Did she tell the police about her encounter?
No, not right away. She said that once she realized Dr. Hammond had died, she wasn't sure what could even be done. But as years went by, she kind of got curious as to whether she was on any of the tapes.
Right.
Then obviously she found out Fort Collins PD had destroyed them and then there was no way of knowing, which tells me, again, that they burned all those tapes. Like it's more proof to me that they did that before identifying all of the victims, that they
Yeah.
didn't want to re-victimize by telling them they were victims. Now, the only thing she was told by police was that there was some tapes that looked to be in a different room than the bathroom. So clearly somewhere else was being
Yeah.
filmed. They never followed up with her after that, so who knows how many victims there were. And when Dr. Hammond died, the case just got tossed, and even though he had been arrested and charged, when you go to the Justice Center in Fort Collins, in district court, it basically looks like Richard Hammond never even committed a crime, which is like one of the most bananas part, I think, about the whole thing.
Yeah.
It just went away.
Literally disappeared.
And I think it might take friends in high places to make that happen. So, still looking into Hammond. I will forever be looking into Hammond. But there was one other thing that came up as we were touring. So, another man named Randy Anglin, his name popped up because there was a note on one of Tim's lawyer's like papers or something that just said, Anglin cut off nipples too.
Which feels like an important note in this case.
Especially it's what we're looking for, right? So we're looking into him still kind of actively. We found out that he was on this crime spree from 77 to 87 in northern Colorado, specifically really active in 87 for burglaries, sexual assaults. I haven't found any cases where a nipple was removed yet, but we did get some records. And in those, he's like clearly escalating. And there is a tip in Peggy's case about a car with Wyoming license plates, like near the area at the time she died. And he had a car with Wyoming license plates. So again, more to be done on him, more to be done on everything, which is the whole point of this story, is to tell people that I think it'd be really easy for police to say like, oh, or the DA's office, whatever, like we tried everything we can, it's a closed case. There's still more that can be done, and it's so obvious. But for some reason, after Tim was released, after he won his like settlement, it just stopped. Now, Tim did go on to write a book about his case that he self-published. And I mean, in all these years, he's been trying to make up for lost time. He likes to work on cars. He works with horses. He's spending time with people he loves. He's making up for lost time with them. And he even has an unexpected confidant these days.
I think it is really ironic that the former lead investigator in the case who came to arrest me in 1992 is actually one of my dearest friends now, Linda Holloway. Turns out she's a really good person. She put herself out there so much. Linda Holloway put herself out there so much to do the right thing. It just, for one, it greatly endears me to her. I'm not good at words, but it's very endearing that she did that. She put herself out there for me, and it just speaks volumes to her integrity. She's just one of those people that she'll do the right thing regardless. She does the right thing. That's a rare person in this world. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't go out on a limb like she did. They would just go with the grain. Life would have been a lot easier for her if she'd have just gone with the grain and not gone against everybody else.
As for Peggy's brother, Tom, he was diagnosed 2.5 years ago with stage 4 colon cancer, which he said is what has made him so vocal. He is one of Peggy's only remaining family members fighting for her. And now he needs us to take up that torch and fight for her.
I said, you guys have had 30-some years to do your job. And I said, obviously, at this point, you're telling me the case is closed. And I said, but the fella upstairs they're not getting by him. He already knows who it is. And he'll take care of this problem. And they just all their faces just turned white. And I said, he will get the final say. You've had your chance. And I said, what's it going to take to reopen this? Because they told me it was closed. And they said, short of a full confession, nothing. I said, what? And they said, unless somebody actually comes forward and admits to it completely and fully, we can't reopen this case. And I was, as far as I was concerned with that meeting, I was done. I wanted to get out of there because for over 30-some years, I waited around for something to take place for this. And then they take somebody and they put him in prison for 9 years, and he's innocent as the driven white snow, and they ruin his life to a certain extent. And then he gets out, and rightfully so. And here we are. Here we are today, right now, doing this interview, and still nothing has been done about it. And it's like everybody just wants to turn a blind eye to it and move on. What? Move on? Well, I don't have much longer to go because I have a disease that'll take my life soon, and I want something done about it. I want the people that have the ability to do their job to get busy and do their job. That's what they need to do. Instead of just turning a blind eye, it is what it is, case closed. There have been a lot of mistakes in this case that I've learned through media, through the newspaper, from Linda, quite a bit from Linda, and I'm not happy. I'm very upset about this. So I don't have longer to go, so I want something done about it immediately.
So Crime Junkies, this is where you come in. Our team has spent months reporting on this case, producing this live show. We've taken it to 17 different cities with a shared goal in mind: justice for Peggy Hettrick. So we're asking you to join us in asking the Colorado Attorney General's office to reopen Peggy's case, assign a new investigator, and explore new DNA testing. And we've made it super easy for you. All you have to do is click the link below, fill out your information, and we're going to send an email on your behalf. Literally, it could not be more simple. This is why we do this show, and we know this is why you guys listen. So please take a moment. I know a lot of you who went to the show were experiencing technical difficulties. We have crashed the Attorney General's website more than once. So this is your reminder. If you were at the show and didn't get an email through, please do that now. And if you're listening, please either stop what you're doing and do it now. Set a reminder. This is so important, and Tom is really looking for your help. You can find all the source material for this episode on our website, crimejunkiepodcast.com.
And you can follow us on Instagram at Crime Junkie Podcast.
We'll be back next week with a brand new episode.